Okay, Namaskar, good evening from New Delhi and Dharamsala. I'm Vijay Kranti. Welcome to you in today's webinar. The title, as we all know, is Environmental Destruction in Tibet by China and Implications for Asia. And today being a very special day, the World Environment Day. This brings us to bring Tibet into focus, which affects not only uh, China and itself, it's affecting the entire Asia, especially countries like India. To start with, I'll just give you a very quick introduction to the organizing two groups, the Center for Himalayan Asia Studies and Engagement, which is CHASE, and Tibetan Youth Congress. The Center for Himalayan Asia Studies and Engagement is a think tank and which is focused on understanding those issues which are impacting countries and societies in and around Himalayas. And especially from the Indian perspective, we want to understand these issues. And it's a platform for exchange of knowledge, views, and perspectives among Indian and international experts, researchers, writers, and advocacy groups also, who take keen interest in various aspects of political, social, environmental, economic, and strategic issues of this region. And Tibetan Youth Congress, as everybody knows, is the worldwide organization of Tibetan diaspora, which includes the traditional, it represents whole of Tibet, which represents all the three provinces of Tibet, which is Utsang, Kham, and Amdo. And it's an independent organization and the largest one among the diaspora. And this is a non-governmental organization, and group, advocacy group, and at the same time, it's a socially active group which helps the Tibetan diaspora in sorting out their various issues, whether other issues. These days, they are very actively engaged in helping the Tibetan community to face the COVID-19 situation. So this was the introduction to our two organizations. And now it's my duty to welcome our panelists today here. I welcome here, let us start with Gabriel Lafitte. We have 5 panelists today: Gabriel Lafitte, Claude RP, Professor Milap Chand Sharma, Tempa Gyaltsen Chamla, and Sonam Tsering. And we will have with us Ayushi Ketkar, who will give vote of thanks. So, Mr. Gabriel Lafitte, he is a very well-known Australian environmentalist who has worked with Tibetans for last over 40 years, and most of us know him because of his very active involvement. He has published many reports on mining, infrastructure, hydro dams, etc. on a regular basis. He's a very active blogger. If you want to read him, he is available easily at www.rukaor.org, and he will talk about the contradictions between China's claims about constructing what they claim constructing ecological civilization in Tibet, or what they say net zero climate heating emissions, against what the real situation is there. And then our next specialist is Claude RP, again a very famous personality among Tibetans, the Tibet supporters, and those people who have interest in Tibet and Tibet, India, China triangle. He is one of the best known experts on this triangle. He is a famous written quite a few books. One of his most monumental book, I would say, is a 4-volume book which is titled India-Tibet Relations from 1947 to 1962. I had the privilege of reading and reviewing this book, and it was really if anybody wants to understand India, Tibet, China triangle, I think his book is one point source, and it's a wonderful book. So I welcome Claude RP. We have Professor Milapchand Sharma, who is a glacial geomorphologist. Welcome, sir. And Professor, he is presently at Jawaharlal Nehru University in geomorphology, and he's known for his seminal work, which is research work on Gangotri Glacier. He understands glaciers of Himalayas very closely, and he has traveled in Tibet also for his academic pursuits. He will speak on geological and environmental relevance of Tibet as the global climate catalyst. So welcome, Professor Milapchand Sharma. Then we have Tempa Gyaltsen Jamla, who is he is heading the environmental desk of Tibetan Government in Exile. I would say it's the Tibet Policy Institute, where he has been involved for many years, and he has presented the case of Tibet at many international forums, which include the UN Climate Summit also. And he has been traveling around to educate and to build world opinion on the environmental situation in Tibet. So welcome, Tempa Gyaltsen Jamla. And then we have Mr. Sonam Tsering, who is an activist from Tibetan Youth Congress. He is the General Secretary of this organization. This organization is one of the largest ones, one organization in the diaspora, and he will be talking about that will be a very different and new angle, as if I can use the term, as victim. His country, the way it has been suffering because of Chinese policies. So this is our panel, and Ayushi Ketkar, she is at JNU, and she's assistant professor there at the Special Center for National Security Studies, and she specializes in international relations, and her previous associations have been with Gautam Buddha University, Amity University, Symbiosis, Bhosala Military College of Nashik, and think tanks like the Institute of Peace and Conflict Studies, Jammu Kashmir Study Center. So this is our panel, and welcome everybody. Now we come to the subject. The subject is quite well known. There are many aspects to this issue because the way China occupied Tibet, and there was a metamorphic change as China occupied Tibet, because Tibet used to be a society which believed in interdependence of Buddhism, and immediately it shifted to another society which believes purely in the power of force, where power and influence come out of gun. So the impact of China's presence in Tibet has been in so many ways. Our panelists will discuss in all those details. Very quickly, these issues are, Tibet is very rich in forests. So we'll see what happened to its the forest, the property, how it was looted or whatever happened to it. Tibet is home to many precious minerals, more than 130 minerals like gold, copper, lithium, and also uranium. And one major issue is going to be the impact on water situation in Tibet. Everybody knows that Tibet is known because of its snow mountains, glaciers, as the third pole, and also the water tower of the world. So there have been so many changes over last 70 years. Our experts will talk about those subjects. And then there is another issue of development, but China claims that they have brought development to Tibet. and this development has been in the form of new cities, new towns, almost 100,000 kilometer of roads, military installations. So our panelists will present what has been the impact of this so-called development. And then there is an issue of the digital pollution, which we call the way internet has fortified the hands of Chinese rulers, the way it has become a surveillance state. So that itself is another issue. And because of these issues, there have been the shape of resistance is changing inside Tibet. Earlier, it used to be direct clash between the people of Tibet and the Chinese military, and now it is resistance in the form of against land grabbing or poisoning of Tibetan waters, and the way lands and lifestyle of the Tibetan nomads is being changed. So all these issues are going to be discussed today. So let us start with Gabriel. Gabriel, we now look forward to you. I have heard Gabriel earlier, and his radiogenic voice, and at the same time, his very philosophical and spiritual approach to this issue I was very impressed by that. So, Gabriel, the stage belongs to you.
Thank you very much, Vijay, and thank you for a thorough introduction and actually, a very comprehensive list of the issues that we might discuss. And because, we have a panel of people who have, very specific qualifications to go into some of the case studies that you've just mentioned, I thought it might be best if I started off doing some big picture stuff, some scene setting, especially since today, as you reminded us, is World Environment Day. And this year, 2021, the whole world is hoping, praying, and planning to gather within the next few months, not once, but twice, to reach global agreement on the biggest of all global environmental issues. In October, delayed because of COVID, but it's now scheduled for October, in Kunming, at the foot of the Tibetan Plateau in Yunnan province of China, all the governments of the world are due to gather to come up with a plan to save the world's wildlife and wild landscapes and global biodiversity, in acknowledgement that the last decade the world has largely failed and we're running out of wildlife. Human beings are crowding out all other species. And then following that global biodiversity meeting under the auspices of the Convention on Biodiversity, the United Nations Convention, which is the only thing the whole world has to reach agreement on how to take effective, accountable action on biodiversity. After that, only a month or two later, in Glasgow in Scotland, as probably everybody knows, the world, all governments in the world are due to meet to make really fateful decisions about what to do about global climate change. So, given this very special moment, this hopefully auspicious moment for the world to come together, let's just continue with that, big picture, broad focus stuff. And then I may have a few moments, and certainly the other speakers will have time to continue on that long list that Vijay Kranti has already given us. And amongst the others on that list that have had a lot of attention is that single rail line that goes all the way from Lanzhou and Xining through Gormo to Lhasa that opened 15 years ago now. The hydro dams on the Yarlung-Tsangpo Brahmaputra and on the Drichu Yangtze. We may also hear about earthquakes and landslides attributable to Chinese interventions in the landscape. It adds up to a long list of disasters for a discussion on China's environmental destruction in Tibet. However, I'd like to start somewhere else. I'd like to start where I think, at least in Western countries, a lot of people's hopes rest these days on those two big conferences coming up, and specifically on what role China will play. China says that every opportunity it is constructing ecological civilization in Tibet. Now, what on earth does that mean? We don't normally talk about ecology and civilization as the one phrase. We don't talk about constructing ecology in most countries, but China does. So what does that mean? China takes every opportunity to portray itself as deeply committed to not only doing the right thing for biodiversity and climate, but actually being a world leader. And that particularly it's trying to achieve through what it presents to the world as its special efforts in Tibet. So here we have two completely incompatible narratives. One on environmental destruction that we're going to hear more about later, and the other one on China as, not only doing the right thing, but in fact being a global leader on environmental issues. So I guess I'm trying to talk to people who are listening, who are wondering how to work out who can we believe. And I think, understandably, so many people naturally want China to succeed. After all, if China is not on board with sincere commitments, then global biodiversity is doomed. In fact, maybe the entire planet is doomed to cook itself to death. So worldwide, people want to believe that China is going to be a responsible and constructive leader on such issues. So in turn, how can we respond? Yes, we can talk about Tibet as victim, and we can start by cataloguing all of those disasters, the case studies. But I think we need to do more. We need to stand back for a moment and see the pattern of development in Tibet and understand what Tibet means to China now, which may not be quite the same as in the past. We've talked already about mining and extraction and pollution and so on. Well, those were China's priorities, but China's priorities, without losing any of the old priorities, are starting to change. China always saw Tibet as, in negative terms, as a liability, a danger, a threat to stability and security, and in environmental terms as a wasteland. That's a phrase that the Chinese used over and over. A wasteland good for nothing much, defined by what it lacks. Through Chinese eyes, Tibet lacked fertility, it lacked productivity, it even lacked oxygen, it lacked warmth, it lacked everything needed for development. Now, those old attitudes have not disappeared, but China now also sees Tibet increasingly as an asset, as a source of carbon capture, mass nature tourism, water provisioning, electricity exported vast distances from hydro dams on Tibetan rivers all the way to the factories of coastal China, which will soon be supplemented by massive wind and solar farms in Tibet, because Tibet is sunny and windy and not overcrowded, and China has plans to plug all the electricity from hydro and wind and solar into the electricity grids. So there has been a shift in Chinese thinking from seeing Tibet as a liability to seeing it as an asset, from a cost centre to a profit centre in market terms. And that, I would suggest, does mean a major shift in environmental impacts. Some areas of Tibet are to be preserved in ways that China presents as timeless, prehistoric, pristine wilderness for tourist consumption. And those are the areas where Tibetan nomads have been removed and will continue to be removed, according to the latest 14th five-year plan, which just came out very recently. Those areas become national parks, nationalized by a nation-building national government that makes Tibetan landscapes into Chinese landscapes with Chinese characteristics. The land may be preserved, but will it still be Tibetan in any meaningful sense if the Tibetans who've always curated it, been the guardians, the stewards of it, are gone, and all stories, all governance, all control is in Chinese hands. Currently, around 35% of the entire area of the Tibetan Plateau, which, just to remind us, is the same size as the whole of Western Europe, already 35% of the Tibetan Plateau is designated as officially protected park or nature reserve. And of course, why? Why does China do this? Because everyone knows China is the world's biggest carbon polluter, the biggest contributor to climate change, and China badly needs offsets. So there's strong motivation to regain credibility. So we need to see this bigger picture, the emerging pattern. Then we can look at the disaster case studies in a wider context and notice the many disasters that seldom get attention. This includes, for example, the cascade of 9 hydro dams on the Machu, the Yellow River, to the north, which already export electricity to distant Chinese provinces. And in those 9 dams, China breeds millions of trout, an alien species that are electrocuted and killed and sent to Shanghai for consumption by rich Chinese, something that Tibetans normally don't like doing, killing huge numbers of sentient beings. For some reason, we seldom talk about it. Other destructive interventions include the large-scale industrialization of Amdo, Qinghai, northern Tibet, where there are so many dirty industries that make lithium batteries for electric vehicles, magnesium, plastics, potash fertilizers, petrochemicals, smelting metals, and so on. Again, Tibetans seldom mention this heavy industrialization of northern Tibet. Nor is there much mention of the power grids that export electricity from Tibet across China, spoiling the national parks and compromising biodiversity. Hardly anyone is focused on the new electrified high-speed railways across Tibet that are under construction right now, from Xining to Chengdu and Lhasa to Chengdu, that impact on the lives of the most densely populated districts of Tibet, and in very rugged, precipitous terrain requiring massive engineering, tunneling, bridging, and also new hydro dams to supply the electricity needed. So these projects that are under construction right now, high-speed rail, very energy intensive, needs rail lines designed on very gentle gradients. They can't handle steep slopes up or down, so the amount of tunneling and bridging and interference in the landscape is enormous. And yet again, why are we not talking about it? So what does all this add up to? I would like to suggest, and to conclude with this point, that there is a pattern here through Chinese eyes of Tibet as both pristine paradise and yet paradoxically at the same time a new geography of intensive exploitation. Now, they are obviously contradictory. How can they sit alongside each other? In China's eyes, in the eyes of the central planners, the central leaders, somehow both are true these days, and their view has correspondingly changed. The way they handle the contradiction is simply geographically through a rigid zoning system that separates all Tibetan landscapes, which are classified as either exclusively ecological or exclusively economic. So China is trying to have it all, and we are living in rather extraordinary times where a new imagination of what Tibet is, what Tibet means to China, what Tibet might mean to the world. And I think that's the reality of the Chinese environmental impacts on Tibet that we need to wrestle with. I'll leave it there because we have a wonderful panel able to go into some of these issues much more deeply and expertly. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Gabriel. The way you have explained the contradiction between how China acts in Tibet and how it is claiming to the whole world, and how China's presentation of Tibet has shifted from being a liability earlier and now exploiting it as an asset. This explains the basic issue of what has happened to Tibet's environment over past 70 years and the challenges Tibet and the rest of the world is facing because of this. So thank you very much, Gabriel. You have made, I'm sure you have made the job of other panelists quite easy. Thank you very much once again. And now we are with Claude RP. Claude is a very well-known friend, a very well-known personality among friends of Tibet, among Tibetans, and those people who are interested in Tibet. So I leave the floor to Claude.
Thank you.
We'll hear you. Thank you.
I will speak only about one project, the Yalong Tsampo, in the Great Canyon, the mega, or I should say the giga project that China is planning. China has been planning for a very long time this project. It seems from Sun Yat-sen's time, they were already planning to do something, some dams. I've seen in the 50s, in the files, in the archives, that when Apapant was a political officer in Sikkim, they already were discussing the possibility of having a dam and producing electricity because of the configuration of the geographical configuration of the grid band and the Yalong Tsangpo. For centuries, nobody knew that it was the same river which was flowing in southern Tibet, Nyingchi, and if it was the same river coming inside the Nifa of Northeast Frontier Agency of northern India. So that just, I gave some figure, 317 kilometer lengths around the Namchawara, which is 7,700 meter high. And it's the steepest gorges in the world. It says 8 times the depth of the Colorado Canyon. And of course, it's also an attraction for the tourists. Gabriel has made a very good presentation, but we should not forget that in 2019, 40 million Han visitor came to Tibet. So in one way, we know that tourism is destructive, and we know even it's happening in India sometime, in Uttarakhand and other places. But 40 million is unbelievable. And the Yalong Sampo tumbles down from 2,200 meters in less than 200 kilometers. If you see Pai, where that project is going to start, to Drepong, which is near the Indian border, there is 2,200 meter altitude difference. So it's enormous, and China wants to use this to produce electricity.
Hello, Claude. You can increase the size of this.
Can you see the second slides?
Please increase the size.
I'm full size now. Can you see the second slide now? Hello?
Yeah, please go ahead then.
That I will just a brief history. I think the first time it was mentioned, it was in Alaska in a conference, and there was a global infrastructure fund, and China applied under a Himalayan hydropower project. At that time, they spoke about 70 giga, means 70,000 megawatt of producing electricity. But it was a very vague project. And years after years, a new project came. At one point in time, they were planning to do micro-nuclear, to use micro-nuclear device to blow up some channel to divert the Yalong Sampo towards Qinghai and the Yellow River. So these projects have taken different forms, and most of them were crazy. And but at that time, they still spoke about 11 dams and a tunnel bringing water to a powerhouse down the Yalong Sampo near Indian border and producing 48,000 mega or 48 gigawatt of electricity. These first projects were mostly linked with the diversion of the Yalong Sampo. And we have seen in the media, the world media and Indian media, that diversion of the Yalong Sampo has been covered. Very often people didn't know exactly what it means. But some of these projects wanted to send the water, as I say, in Qinghai province, and to replenish the Yellow River, which is being a dying river. And at the same time, it's like the Nile in Egypt. It's the cradle of the Chinese civilization. So over the years, different projects have come up. But at that time, what I've been following very closely since years 2000, now 20 years, it was technologically not feasible. For the first reason that there was no access to this place, which is the Great Mountain. I mentioned very quickly one of the craziest project, which was called Save China Through Water from Tibet. It was two gentlemen called Gao Kai and Li Ling. Gao Kai was a PLA retired general, and Li Ling was an engineer, and they said 600 billion cubic meter of water, Tibetan water, are going waste. For them, it means waste. It's what Gabriel says. I mean, there's the fact that it doesn't stay in China, it's waste, because most of this water flow to India and Bangladesh. So they devised a project taking water much upstream in near Tsetang, near Yalong Valley, and with a dam of 300 meters, and taking this water to Gansu and Qinghai province. And it was called Chaotan Tanjing, because it was reaching Tanjing town and bringing water to Tanjing. So this was the project. It printed 10,000 copies of it, and every member of the party, as well as all the people from the Chinese Academy of Science, scientists and all, they study. It was mostly rejected by the scientists as well as by some of the party cadres, leaders, but it shows that China has been dreaming of having a big project like that. I presume that it is part of Chinese civilization that for the emperor to have just huge project like that, like the Great Wall of China. And now we have also the diversion from north to south. But that was the biggest of. I said it was not possible at that time. It was not feasible. It was not because the Metok, which is called Pemake, is a very sacred place for the Tibetan. And part of the sacredness was due that it was not reachable. You had to trek. And Metok, which is the last village, now it's a huge town. But till 2013, there was no access road. And China opened that tunnel in November 2013. I think it's when Mr. Wen Jiabao, the Chinese premier, reached in India. They announced that the road had been opened and that it was the last county in China which has no access road. So this opened the door to the development of all this sacred Pemake, and particularly Metok, which has become a huge town now. I've recently seen a video. They're showing Metok. They duplicate Punakatsong in Bhutan. They duplicate just for the tourists. No, I hope they will not put Eiffel Tower or something like that. But everything is geared toward tourism and bringing lakhs and or millions of tourists. Just the Ningxi prefecture of one of the 7 prefectures of Tibet has received 7-8 million of tourists in 2019. So that was a turning point, and that opened the possibility to do something much bigger. Now, the second turning point has been 2-3 weeks ago when last tunnel was opened to open a second road. And that road will lead to the giga hydropower plant. And it's only 67 kilometers. It's not big, but it links Pai, town in Ningxi prefecture or Ningxi city, they call it now, to one place called Drepong in Metok country. So the difference of altitude is between Pai at 9,500 feet and Drepong 2,500. It's more than 6,500 feet, means 2,100 meters of difference, altitude difference, which makes give that possibility of having a big giga plant, which would be 3 times the size or the production of the Three Gorges Dam. I mean, you have all read about the catastrophic implication of the Three Gorges Dam, but this one would be 3 times the size. So I'm saying that that new road is the first stage for doing the big dam in a few years' time. And interestingly, it was the company who did that road is called Wawang, and Lingxi means Ningxi in Tibetan, hydropower group. It means it's a group who does hydropower, who builds dams. They have done that road, and most probably it will follow the hydropower that I will describe later on, will follow that road which has been opened 3 weeks ago. And they said that road has cost 310 millions. And as Gabriel mentioned several times, China is very keen when they speak about a project to show off how much they've invested in environment. And they said they have invested $17 million for this project, which was double what was in the 5-year plan, which was allotted. They have doubled the allocation so that to take care of the environment. And the journey from Ningxi to Metok will be shortened from 12 hours to 4 hours. So it's a huge. So now I've managed through reading through different Chinese articles, I have managed to get the road. Basically, it goes through one tunnel, which is 4 4.6 kilometer. And Doshungla is a very high peak, and it goes below. And it started Pai. Pai is one of the on the Yalong Tsampo, and just at the entrance of the Great Band, and it goes to Drepong, and means it's on the Yalong Tsampo also, and it's very close to the Indian border. Shirang, the last village before the Indian border in Upper Siang district of Arunachal, is about 20 kilometers from Drepong. So you see the issue, the military issue also, the fact that this road now will be very close to the border, and India would have certainly to take into account the Indian army and reinforce this Geling sector, the Geling-Tuting sector of Arunachal Pradesh. And interestingly, I got this photo of Geling, of the Yalong Tsampo, which becomes the Siang when it enters India. 1 month ago, some friends sent it to me, and you see the color of the river. That was just because of the digging of that second tunnel, Lobang tunnel. So you can imagine now it's just a road, but when they will go for the Giga project, the Siang will be constantly black, if not brown, black, and the consequences for Arunachal Pradesh, Assam, and Bangladesh. And that road is divided in 4 sections. As I mentioned already, that technologically China has progressed tremendously in the last 20 years. In tunneling, in doing road in high altitude, in controlling the permafrost issues. First, by doing the train from Chingai, Golmud to Lhasa in 2006, and now the new railway line from Chengdu to Lhasa, which part of it has already been constructed, especially the Lhasa-Ningchi road. They have technologically, they are much advanced on anybody. I mean, India is very proud to have opened the Atal tunnel in Manali, but it took a long time, and now India is planning one tunnel in Chojila and another one in Zanskar. But technologically, I think China has 15, 20 years in advance on China for this mastering the road making in high altitude or in difficult condition, as well as tunneling. So the one tunnel I mentioned below Dochung, that Dochungla tunnel is 4.6, which is relatively small for China. They are planning a tunnel of 30, 40 kilometers in the new railway line between Chengdu and Lhasa. And so they have divided in 4 parts, 4 sections, and they will take one section after the other. That's the road, and that road, it will be functional next year in May, June. Now the tunnel is open, everything is open, just they have to complete the road. But you have to understand that this area, it was a virgin forest. It was such a beautiful place. There was no villages or habitation. And it makes a very big difference when you think of the future hydropower plant. In the case of the Three Gorges Dam, there was 1.2 or so of rehabilitation of people, relocation. People was, because of the dam, was relocated. In that case, there's not that problem. So it makes it in one way easier. Though the Huaneng company, hydropower company, admit that the climate along the highway is changeable. Highway, and also it will be the same route, more or less. So the highway is changeable. Natural disasters such avalanches, landslide, heavy rainfall, and mudslide occur frequently. The construction environment is harsh, and the construction is extremely difficult. So themselves, they admit this. Now, mudslides occurred in March, very serious one. again, but it was upstream from Pai, maybe 30, 40 kilometers from Pai. And again, the river in the Siang River and the Brahmaputra became black. That was in March of 2021. Earlier in November 2017, there was a earthquake, very serious earthquake, more or less in the same area. And I think Professor Sharma will know better than me that how fragile is this area. But this earthquake really had very serious consequences for the rivers downstream in India. And for 2-3 weeks, China would not announce that it was an earthquake. And people, I remember it came to the parliament that the local MP, Tapir Gao and Kiren Rijuju went to parliament and said that the Siang River is black. What is happening? It's only after 3-4 weeks that China announced that there was an earthquake. There is always a secrecy from the Chinese side. So that's also another issue. But just to say that this area is extremely fragile. We have seen what happened a few months back in Chamoli in India. Here it takes proportions which are much more important because due to the altitude and it's a very ecologically sensitive areas, and China knows it, but still China persisting in wanting to build that. So now the big ones. Since the 90s, China has been speaking of having a cascade of hydropower station, not one. You read usually in the India's media, and I think the world media in general, that they speak about huge dam, a dam the size or 3 times the size of the Three Gorges Dam. It's not the case because I think the turbine would not be able to take it. It would be too much. So they are planning a cascade of hydropower plants. Now, all the projects which have come up on the Chinese website or which has that we have been able to see, they show the hydropower plants at the different places. So, but basically the same principle. It is based on the difference of altitude between Deyang, which is near Pai, where the project starts on the Yalong Sampo, which is about 30 kilometers east of Ningxi town, and the valley of the Yalong Sampo. Now, they say that a tunnel will be built between the altitude of 9,500 feet and the altitude of 9,000. It means 500 meters difference. So it doesn't make very big. It's very feasible for a turbine to handle this difference. But at the entrance of there'll be a small dam, a relatively small dam, because now I've seen that last week on the upper Yangtze, they commissioned a new dam, which is 277 meters high. And even the other 3 dams on the Yalong Sampo upstream of Ningxi are much higher. 50 is very small. The reason is because Bayi is the main army headquarters. The PLA headquarters is located 30 meters. So they don't want, if something happens, some floods happen, they said it openly that they don't want Bayi to be flooded and their military equipment to be destroyed. So it's relatively small, and it goes into a tunnel till 900 feet. And later on, there'll be 9 cascade stations, hydropower stations. So this cascade, 9 stations means about 700 feet between each one, which is it's possible to handle for the turbine, which are presently on the market, which is presently manufactured in China or elsewhere. If there was only one, that would not be possible. And so I have done a map. I'm not 100% certain, but after studying, after changing it so many times, I come to that conclusion that today that would be something like that. It joins in Drepung, it joins the Yalong Tsangpo, and maybe there will be one between Drepung and Chirang, which is the last Tibetan village. And you see the two Indian villages of Bishing and Geling. This is part of Geling circle of Upper Siang district of Arunachal. You see how close it is. It's a couple of kilometers from the border. So you understand the implication for India, the environmental implication, the strategic implication, the military implication. If something happens, like something happened in Chamoli, you see the destruction. Or in 2005, there was in Kinnaur district, on the Sutlej, there was a glacial lake who burst. It brought devastation to the entire area. So this thing happening, this thing will continue to happen because of the climate change and other. And also the fact that to do that project, you'll have to bring tens of thousands of trucks of GCB. You'll have to bring tens of thousands of workers. The worker will come from outside, from mainland China. You will have to build villages for this thing. So there will be such a destruction in Pemake, which was the earliest, one of the 2-3 earliest place in Tibet. So implication, it depends on the hydraulic head, I mentioned it earlier, and the capacity of the turbine. But as it is designed, I think the next 3-4 years, China will polish the design. They have announced it in their 14 5-year plan during the 2 sessions in March. They announced that they will go for that giga project. But I think, reading what I've read in the Chinese blogs and media, they are not absolutely certain of the design, but they will polish it. And the road, it was the first stage so that they can really go on the spot and take all the scientific measurements. I said these trucks, the GCB, they'll bring just destruction. And what I call relocation in reverse. For the Three Gorges Dam, 1.2 or 3 million people were relocated outside the dam area. In that case, as nobody lives there, most very few villages along the Yalong Tsangpo, but that shortcut that from Pei to Drepung, there's nobody there. So what I call relocation in reverse, they will bring tens of thousands of people, and they will build this Xiaokang village. You know about this Xiaokang village is to fight poverty. China, Xi Jinping has decided to build hundreds of villages along the border. But all these villages are inhabited mainly by local people as well as Han migrants. So this dam will bring tens of thousands or maybe a lakh of Han migrants to this area close to the border and change completely the demography of the Indian border. So for India, it's a huge implication that India has to really study. The 3 dams have been completed upstream of the Yalong Tsangpo, the Jangmu, the Gyalsa, and Dagu, which is going to be completed soon. They are much higher, but I have seen, at least for the Gyalsa and the Dagu, they have built this Xiaokang village nearby. And these villages, once they are built, they will not be destroyed, or they will remain there, and it will the migrant will stay there and marry Tibetan, as it has happened in all over, from Ladakh to Loïd sector to the tri-junction with Burma. It has happened. the most sacred place. It was a holy place that Guru Padmasambhava blessed, and just to go there was a very famous pilgrimage that will be absolutely destroyed. And the goddess Pandanamo is supposed to live there. I don't know what will happen, how she'll react to this situation, but it's something which is unbelievable. And I think China is very clever. They don't present the entire project in one go, but I'm absolutely certain that it's a first way to divert the Yalong Tsangpo at a later stage, let's say between 5 and 10 years from now, because there is no way that they can use that electricity produced in Tibet, though now they have done high tension line, which they can evacuate part of this electricity, but there is no way that it can be evacuated so much electricity so far. So that will be the first stage for a diversion. Now, what is the solution? What Gabriel said was very interesting, because they want to project themselves as fighting the environment. And they say that it will be the carbon neutrality goal will be achieved by 2060. So they will use that particular project to say that we are producing green electricity. But I'm not sure, in view of the destruction that I mentioned already, that is green electricity. I think it's red energy, it's not green energy, and this is the very central point. Now, China has not signed or ratified the UN Convention of Laws of Non-Navigational Use of International Watercourse. They were one of the 3 countries in the world in 1997 who opposed it, with, I think, Turkey and Burundi. And they will not sign it. I don't see, in the mood they are today, when we see what is happening, the confrontation in Ladakh, where they don't want to move an inch, I don't think they will sign any international treaty like that. And of course, there would be the possibility of signing something like the Indus Water Treaty of 1960, though India and Pakistan have been fighting war, have not been the best friend. They still signed a treaty in 1960, and both states stick to it. But I don't see China having a treaty with India about the Yalong Tsangpo and the Siang and the Brahmaputra. Or the possibility of a treaty with Bangladesh also, the tripartite treaty. One time, 5-6 years ago, one Chinese ambassador mentioned it very briefly, but after that it was dropped. And ultimate question, can China be trusted even if they sign the treaty? For example, during the Doklam episode, the tension with 73 days on the tri-junction with Bhutan, China stopped sharing immediately the whatever the data on the flow of the Yalong Tsangpo that they sell to India. They are not sharing, they are selling to India, but immediately. So at a slighter pretext, they stop sharing or selling even these data. So it's very difficult to trust China today, especially after the confrontation in Ladakh. And finally, to conclude, I want to quote Chairman Xi Jinping. He said, when mankind makes rational use of nature and protects nature in a friendly manner, nature's rewards are often generous. When mankind develops disorderly and rudely plunder nature, nature's punishment must be ruthless. Human damage to nature will ultimately hurt mankind. This is irresistible law. So it's what Xi Jinping is saying today, but between what he says and what is happening, sometimes there's a small difference. I don't know, Vijay, if I have time to show a short video about a very recent video of that area.
No, I think you can let us, because you told me you have a very interesting video. So let us...
if it starts. Because technologically, it doesn't want to start. So sorry. It doesn't want to
Okay,
start.
okay, we can keep it for some other time.
Yeah, yeah. It was just a video of the Chinese TV 3 weeks ago. It was showing that area, how fragile, how landslide are, mudslide are recurring all the time. It was very to just see that video tells you about that area, which is very difficult.
Anyhow,
Thank you. Thank you.
thank you. Thank you, Claude. The way you have explained in details the implications involved for India and for the Tibetan region, even for local population also of the Yalung Tsampo project, that is an eye opener, and especially the way you have explained that uh, that area is very fragile, and even in once that they may not be possible, it may not be possible for them to construct it the way they want. If they do, they will have to bring so much of population, and that itself is going to create a danger for not only the Tibetan population there, it is going to be a permanent danger for the Indian borders. So this is a very interesting side to the whole issue of Yalung Tsampo. Thank you very much. I'm sure our policy makers in India are going to take notice of it. So thank you, Claude. Thank you very much. And now we come to Professor Milapchand Sharma. I have already introduced him. He's a glaciologist. He understands, he has done deep study of Indian glaciers. He has traveled inside Tibet. So he has a very good insight into the Tibetan situation. So I'll request Professor Milap Sharma to please enlighten us. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Good evening, everybody. Jule, Tashidile, and Namaskar. I hope my slide is visible to all of you.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. So I would like to speak from inside the place, inside Potala, because it belongs to me. I have my emotional and cultural connections with Tibet for now 3 generations. And I was fortunate to have traveled, from north to south. And what I saw there, I would like to tell about it. And also I would like to brush up with the geological and glaciological component, what we understand in Tibet from our own experience and from the data that comes on to us from many of our friends who are working on Tibet. Now, to start with, I'm going to talk about global and regional relevance of Tibet. You think of Tibet as highest or roof of the world. That is what we say, 4,000 plus meters. So what has really happened is in geological times, it has changed the circulations, global circulations, thus changing the climatic pattern of the continent and subcontinent also. And because it's at 4,000 meters plus, we have rarefied atmosphere. So anything that you play with is going to affect the ecology of the place. So any disturbance that is being brought into the rarefied atmosphere will definitely be taking a toll on the ecology. So I'll bring that also in. I'll speak about the glaciers because that is what I've been doing for now decades, and what the glaciers of Tibet look like. And we will talk about the tectonic controls of the rivers on the rivers. As I do study the earthquakes, I did some study of 91 earthquake of Uttarakhand, Uttarkashi, and Chamoli earthquakes to know what physically really changes take place and how we can, plan accordingly. Ecological reorganization, that is what is being done. My previous speakers, the senior speakers that talked about ecological reorganization that China is now playing with Tibet, and how this is going to be disastrous. I'll talk about that. From open grazing, they are making it, captive, enclosed grazing farmlands. So what implication it will have on open grazing, the wilderness, is it is going to reduce the intake of fertilization, which has happened over centuries in Tibet. So stopping from open to captive, or changing from open to captive, is going to be something which one has to think about what consequences it will have on the ecology, because we have the Chiru gazelle also in Tibet, all around, sensitive ecology that we have. And while walking through Tibet from Xining to Lhasa, I'll show you some of the examples, what has really been happening, and also how these river controls of Chinese over international rivers can have the consequences. We had the floods in 2000. We do not know how it was generated, which called Satluj floods. 2005 also we had, but then 2005 we know for sure because it was Parichu how it happened. But then we have to take some clue about these floods, how this can change, and how in tectonically sensitive areas like Tibet, this can go haywire any day because you don't have control over tectonics. You don't have control over how the river is going to flood if they are thinking of making those reservoirs. So I've put that also in. Now, think of, as I said, group of the world, 2.5 million square kilometers area. So it has not only affected the continental China, it has affected India as well. But we always believed until recently that Indian climate system is, controlled by two systems. One we call monsoon system, brings in rain. One we call as westerlies, it brings in snowfall and winter rains in the western part of India. But what we see now is that, initially we thought that the mountains do not allow these winds to cross over. But what is seen recently is these can cross over the Himalayas and bring in the climate. It can moderate the climate, moderation even on the Indian landscape. So this I would like to highlight on that it's not just, the Tibetan climate, but Tibetan climate can also affect the Indian climate, south of the Himalayas. And this is something very new, which I didn't know until recently because we had no satellite information. So in recent years, we have tried to look at the satellite informations, satellite images, and to understand how things happen. Now, think of India. This is India. Now, this entire system, 4,000 meters, as I said, has affected the entire circulation on the subcontinent and Chinese continent as well. But these are fairly older, much older than the humans. So we have no control over this. But the control that we have to think about is, as these formed, what has happened is we have the geological weak areas as suture zones. We have the faults all around. Now you look at the faults, how these faults are turning south. And this is where these rivers are also coming into, where the Karakoram fault we have. So we have the Indus here, Indus Sangpo suture zone that we have. So we have Satluj also. So controlling the rivers along these fault lines would be, something very, very dangerous. It will be like a nuclear bomb downstream. So any day, if it is, breached because of earthquakes, it can be disastrous. But then we know for sure that how Corona also happened because there's, the corona was kept, the news of corona was kept under wrap for a while. Nobody believes how corona came into the area. Now this is where we have to be very careful. This is tearing apart. So this is all to do with geology. Chinese cannot control, the world cannot control. This will be controlled only by the tectonics, the nature. So if there is this fault which goes from Andaman into China, into Tibet, into China. If this gets activated, you will see that how this is going to split. So shearing of the mountains, mountain front north of the Himalaya is what is taking place. So this puzzle is a warning. In fact, this is why Mike Sale, who has done his work in these areas. And if this happens, as I said, tectonics have more control than the humans. So earthquakes will be generated, earthquakes cannot be stopped. And anytime you can have 8+ magnitude earthquakes that can destroy these reservoirs, if they are thinking of, cascading reservoirs or large dams, hydroelectric dams, this can have consequences downstream, as my senior speaker has just talked about in Assam, in Bangladesh. It will be absolutely disastrous. And on the western side, it can be, Kinnaur, it can be, it can reach up to Punjab anytime. So we need to be very careful because we cannot control nature. We cannot control tectonics. I don't know whether Chinese can control. Chinese can control everything. That is what I could, see in recent years, how China is behaving and how it is controlling. Now, on the ground in Tibet also, this is within Tibet, the interior of Tibet. This is the earthquake-initiated fault scarp. So even within Tibet, earthquakes occur, and you can have the slip of the mountains. So this scarp is very interesting. We happened to visit it and to see, we tried to look at how this happens. That means it's fragile. The entire plateau has become fragile of late because of the geological age and because of the continuing tectonics. Any day you can have the earthquakes initiated, and you can have faults, fractures like this. So these are to be looked at and thought about. How you think of most of these rivers originating from these higher grounds, and Tibet being water tower, as we say, because major rivers are from Tibet in South Asia, into India, into Pakistan. So possibly they are going to use it as some arm twisting technique for the future. And that is for sure, they will use it to subjugate, to dictate their terms. One has to be very, very careful. Climatic systems that I was talking about, yes, two of these, but then we have, through these two, we had, Mathas Gula had proposed that entire Tibetan plateau, because it was uplifted, there was immense amount of glaciation in the past, but we have very little records except for a few areas. So this was hypothetical that at 4,000 meters, if you look at 4,000 meters, the temperature drops considerably. So possibly it had at one point of time created, the entire ice sheet over Tibetan plateau, but the ground realities do not really show that it was ice cap on ice sheet on Tibet. But then many of the glaciers had expanded, and these glaciers we checked in the field also how these had expanded, what features they have left behind, and how they are presently, how these glaciers are. Now you look at this Tibetan environment, as I said, pristine environment, beautiful, clean, rarefied at 4,000 plus meters, and also slow melt of snows and glaciers have created large amount of the lakes. So wetland area in Tibet is large. Now this wetland also has this wetland also has some other relationship. It takes into account the increased CO2 also. So it's a sink area for increased CO2, but how much it can take, I wonder, because it's increasing over the years. And Chinese railway. All around this passage, they have left for yak herders to take the yaks across. But look at this. This is something that we were interested in. This is the glaciated valley. So glaciers were considerably large in the geological times. Some of the remains of the glaciers here. Also, now these glaciers have become very smaller now. This is the team. Thanks to INQA, they have organized this Tibet trip, which was my dream, that I wanted to see Tibet. So INQA was the one who. So this is the condition of glaciers that we have. Beautiful glaciers. In India, you don't have this kind of glaciers. In India, we have dark, debris-covered glaciers. Tibetan glaciers are coal-based glaciers. So these are coal-based, extremely high, very less of mass that changes. So it has remained very clean. Now, what you do is you have the railway line here. You have the road also along. So you increase CO2, you will have black carbon reaching these glaciers. So once the black carbon reaches glaciers, it is going to melt much faster, maybe 10 times faster. So the life of glaciers will be reduced by increasing, which has happened in past few decades. On Tibetan plateau, the Chinese activity has increased. So this definitely would lead to increase in black carbon. Black carbon will definitely be melting these glaciers 10 times faster than what we see today. So this is one of the glaciers that we went to look at how these coal-based glaciers behave. This glacier had expanded. In fact, this had surged because of earthquake in I think it was in 1978 or so, if I remember correctly. Now 78, it had expanded. So surging through earthquake is also there. Although these glaciers are not that dangerous as that we saw in Chamoli in recent times, but they do have the tectonics do have control over the glaciers, how the glaciers are going to behave. So once fragmented through surge, glaciers will melt faster. So if earthquakes become frequent and high intensity earthquakes, high magnitude earthquakes, you will have fragmentation of these glaciers as well, and melting would be faster. So we try to look at, correlate the climatic events across the Himalayas and Tibet. We see similar trend that happens, in Tibet and in the Central Himalayas, in the Nepal Himalayas, in areas in Pakistan also. So this entire area is affected by similar climatic systems. Geologically speaking, this is roughly around 50,000, starting from 60,000 to roughly about 25,000. So if these are the indicators that we have from the past, for future also we have to think about this. Now, as I said, we never thought that the monsoon clouds can cross over and create, rainfall or cause rainfall over Tibet. So this is recent one, 18th of May, satellite image on the left hand side. If you look at the cyclone, large impact it had over Tibet and in China and in Mongolia also. So this one is of the 4th of this month, June. So here also you can see that these can cross over the mountains, it doesn't care. The nature doesn't care. It can affect the entire area. This is today morning. Again, the clouds from pole to Arabian Sea, that you can see over it, the entire area, the continents. So these have no boundaries. The climate has no boundaries when it comes to. So it can have continental scale of changes that can come. One has to be watchful about it, whether this is happening from south to north or north to south. South to north, it will bring rains. North to south, it will bring chill. So month of May in India, in northern India, has been very, very nice. Nobody was looking at where the winds were coming from, where the clouds were coming from. Yesterday, I spoke to my family in the mountains. They say the chill in the morning and evening is as good as during January and February. So that is the cold is still continuing because the winds are coming across from a very far off places like polar areas. So that is bringing climate changes. Okay. So as I said, historically, if I'm relating the present with the historical climate, then this is the one which gives us the example. This is within Tibet. Look at the number of layers and similar layers. That means the climate has existed, the similar climate has existed for a very long time because there was no interruption to have created such a kind of nice canyon, as good as Grand Canyon. But it's not that deep, but certainly it gives the idea that the process that is working today has been working in this area for a very long time. Similarly, Tibet, as we know, has been very cold. So ice wedges of this nature in Tibet are, this is close to Coconut Lake. Ice wedges are indicative of permafrost conditions which have existed in Tibet for a very long time. So are we going to change through the human action, the anthropogenic actions, the climatic conditions in Tibet? I do not know. But look at these are the remnants of the glaciers of past. These have been very large, but then you go into, good 25, 30,000 years ago. So we need to consider that climate can change and it can leave behind some of these landforms which we are trying to rebuild to understand. But what is happening is this was in the past, the glacier was coming down from here, so it left behind these. But here, if you look at the permafrost, these are the areas where open grazing is common. So open grazing takes place, but then permafrost and wetland in Tibet also takes care of CO2 sink areas. So if you increase the temperature by 1.5 degrees or 2, this permafrost is going to go forever. So once permafrost is gone, your intake of or sink of CO2 will also reduce considerably. Now, these are the areas where grazing is open grazing of yaks. So there was a camp here. So pastures, now Chinese are thinking, I'm told, that they are making it, captive enclosed pastures. So that will again affect the ecology and the quality of animals also. Yaks do not like, enclosed environment. Yaks have the free, these are more like wild animals. So making them as captive, farmland type of economy, I think that would be a disaster. But Chinese are doing that. Culture is still protected. Culture is still there. Culture is spoken by people, but not through language, through their actions. So hopefully it will survive because we have friends of Tibet all around the world. We would like to see this culture and community to to progress and remain with us. But there are, between Golman and Namso, large areas which are desertic areas. Winds pick up, there's sand particles, which is fragmented sands, and you can have a sand blast on the face also. That we did experience. Changthang area is Chiru Wildlife Sanctuary, the Pashmina goat, gazelle wildlife sanctuary. So this is designated there. But then we were getting into Tibet, and then you have to go through this. At many points, you cannot take even photographs of the railways. You cannot take photographs of the tunnels. We did try to take out some of this. Now here you can see the tunnel and the roads. So this is going to change, as I said, the entire ecology of the Tibetan plateau, and I do not know how long this can sustain. Because giving 1 degree and a half changes in temperature, increase in temperature can cause all those glaciers and permafrost to go. Open grazing, as we witnessed all around, was very common. We tried to speak to the local people also, but unfortunately my language is not Tibetan. I couldn't speak, but it was through gestures that we were communicating. As I said, culture still continues, but then it is all without words, really. And the horsemen come looking for and meeting you from distances. They are the traditional people. So we still have, that smile on their face whenever they meet you and greet you. But unfortunately, the language was a barrier for me. The families also come and communicate, so a few exchanges of words and goods. Highest lake in the world, the Namso. So we happen to go to Namso. As I said, this is just close to Lhasa, north of Lhasa, and culture, as you can see here, the culture still survives, and it has to survive for millions, for centuries to come, because that is what Tibet is known for. And Namso is extremely clean, one of the largest freshwater lakes in the world. And along the lake, we have the yaks also, as I said. These are the open grazing areas, but then once you make captive enclosed areas, ecology will be disturbed. Namso, blowhole of Namso tells us that in the past the lake level was much higher, but then definitely because we had the glaciers melting, and these are endorheic lakes, so lake it must have been much the level must have been higher up, and the winds created these blowholes all around. Shorten futures, glaciers, I said shorten futures because your activity is changing, your land use is changing, you are bringing in more pollutants. BC concentration is increasing on the Tibetan glaciers. If you look at some of the papers by Chinese authors, they also report as black carbon on the glaciers. So black carbon is going to increase because the activities are not going to stop as of now. Permafrost, as I said, you change policy, you change the environment. So ecologically, it will be very destructive. Yes?
Professor Sharma, I would request you to please conclude. We have 2 more speakers.
Okay. I'm coming too. Yes, sir.
Right, sir. Right. Sorry, sir.
Yes. Looking at Lhasa from top of the world, the Potala, you can see how high-rise buildings are coming, which are far off. So these are the areas which have been developed in recent years, but when you see close to Potala, you have the traditional market system, traditional artifacts. Also, these are very close to Potala, and far off places as the recent ones, Jokhang, the Lhasa temple, where we did pray for Tibet to get liberated one day. I did pray. Now, these are the rebirths that I'm talking about, and look at these. You can compare all these faults with the alignment of the rebirths. So you control the rebirths, you control the countries downstream. So that is what Chinese are following right now. And this one is to thank you all. Thank you. I had to rush through some of the last slides, but then I hope I could convey what is happening inside and what is going to happen through the tectonics and the climate change. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Sharma. I wish we had some more time. The kind of visuals you had, such a rich collection of visuals and very meaningful visuals. Thank you very much for this, and it was a privilege. It was just like walking through Tibet with you, and especially the point which you raised, one major point, that nature has its own role to play, the tectonic role, that can make a big difference, which nobody can control. And you are advised that China should not be playing too much with the Tibetan rivers, especially.
Sure.
Let us hope the wisdom will fall on their leaders, and not only Tibet, the whole Asia will be saved from a disaster which is being created. Thank you very much, sir. I wish some other time we have a chance to listen to you in more details. Sure. Thank you once again.
Thank you.
And now it's Tempa Gyaltsen Jamla, who is the head of environment desk of Tibet in Dharamsala. Tempa Gyaltsen ji, we have limitation of time, so we have two speakers right now, and then we will have some time up to 7. We will have at least we should have about 15 minutes for question answers. So I request our audience to please post your questions on the comments box. When you post them, they are reaching us, and we'll try to entertain as many questions as possible. So please do post your questions. And Tempa Gyaltsen ji, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Vijay ji, and just our previous speaker, Professor Milab ji, rightly ended on Tibetan.
Your sound level needs to be increased, please.
Today on the World Environment Day,
good.
I'm very happy to be part of an environmental discussion, particularly Professor Milab ji rightly ended on the importance of Tibetan rivers. Today, I will, in my presentation, there are bits of discussion about the rivers as well. Now, since it's Environment Day, I am very happy to be part of an environment discussion which deals with one of the most important ecological issues, the Tibet's environment importance and its current situation. We have here got some very prominent speakers who I personally know, many of you, and who have put a great effort in environment conservation in general and Tibet's environment in particular for the last many years. Now, I would like to focus my talk on natural disasters in Tibet and its possible implications in the coming years. For me as an environmentalist and also as a Tibetan, increasing cases of natural disasters in recent years is a particular concern. I have been trying to put this issue in discussion since 2015 with regular articles and presentations in hope of sensitizing it, as well as forcing China to put in proper disaster mitigation mechanisms in Tibet. So such efforts would eventually protect Tibetans from impending natural disasters in the coming years. I'm sure many of you must have heard or read about increasing cases of landslides, mudslides, and floods in Tibet in recent years. Today I will briefly speak on 4 particular case examples of natural disasters in the last 5 years, which had serious local and regional implications. Now, the first case example is a twin glacier avalanche in Ngari. Now, on 17 July 2016, 600 million cubic meters of a glacier slide into Aru summer pasture in Rutuk County in Ngari. Now, this particular glacier slide killed 9 Tibetan nomads and buried hundreds of cattle. On the 21st September 2016, just a month or 2 later, there was another glacial avalanche at the same mountain. Now, this particular glacial avalanche had huge scientific importance. After months of study, the scientists confirmed that the twin glacier slide were due to both atmospheric and temperature rise and ground temperature rise in Tibet. And now, this indicates serious risk to the 46,000 glaciers present on the Tibet Plateau. Now, with 46,000 glaciers covering an area of 105,000 square kilometers of area, Tibet Plateau has the largest concentration of glaciers after North and South Pole. So any drastic shift or change to the Tibet glaciers would lead to catastrophic consequences for Tibet and its neighboring countries. As there are thousands of glaciers, now there are thousands of glaciated mountains across Tibet, and every town or village in Tibet is located in close proximity to one or the other glaciers. So any similar glacier avalanche in the coming years would pose threat to the Tibetan community at every level. The risk would be even greater along the Himalayan belt. There are 52 million people living across Himalayas, which stretch into India, Pakistan, Bhutan, Nepal, and Tibet. The lack of proper infrastructure as well as poor road connectivity in the region means any rescue or prevention efforts would be delayed, which means causing greater damage from any glacier-related disasters. Now, the second case example is a massive mudslide and a mountain collapse in Tibet. Now, on 7th September 2017, a terrifying scene of mud flowing down a hill in Zatir in northeast Tibet. The mudslide looked like a lava flow, sent people and animals into panic. The mudslide, though, did not cause any major damage. The unusual sight made people worry, and scientists wonder what was that cause. Just a few days earlier, there was on the 30th August 2017, there was a huge mountain collapsed in Machen in Amdo and killed 9 people in their sleep in the early morning. Now, scientists concluded that the mudslide was that both the events were due to softening of ground and permafrost thawing or melting as a result of increasing temperature and rainfall in Tibet. Now it is very important to note that Tibet's grasslands and permafrost store 12,300 millions of carbon and a significant amount of methane gas. So melting of permafrost and grassland degradation in Tibet would release vast amount of carbon and methane into the atmosphere. This will lead to rise in atmospheric temperature on the Tibet Plateau, which could greatly destabilize the Indian monsoon as well as severely contribute to global warming. Now the third case example is a twin landslide which blocked Dichu in Tibet. Now Dichu is called Yans in China and other regions. On the 11th October 2018, 23 million cubic meter of rock mass and earth debris fell into the Dichu River, or the Yans River in Bolo Township in East Tibet. The landslide quickly created a barrier lake with two 290 million cubic meter of water in it. Fortunately, the landslide dam started to breach naturally the very next day, and by third day, which was on 13th October, the barrier lake had already drained without causing any loss of life and significant damage in property. Unfortunately, there was another massive landslide at the very same spot on 3rd November 2018. So, which means within 23 days, there was another landslide. This time, 3.5 million cubic meter of rock mass fell into the river and blocked Asia's longest river for 11 days. Now, you know that Asia's longest river was blocked for 11 days. In the second landslide, a massive 523 million cubic meter of water were already accumulated in the new lake, and the river moved upwards to a distance of 70 kilometers, thus inundating and flooding 23 villages, a township headquarters, and monasteries in the region. Surprisingly, the first batch of excavators arrived at the site only on the 5th day of the second landslide, and it took another 5 days to create a spillway. So even though China, which is considered the most powerful nation by both means of economy and military, took 11 days to release a blockage of the Yangtze River. So this put millions of Chinese in fear and the risk of being flooded. Now the Dichu or the Yangtze River is no ordinary river. It has 6,300 kilometers of length, and it is the third longest river in the world and longest river in Asia. It has the sixth largest. The river has the sixth largest discharge volume in the world, and the river flows into 10 provinces, covering almost all of southern regions of China, and 1/3 of all Chinese inhabitants live in the Yangtze River basin. And on this very same river, there are 50,000 dams were built, which means about 57% of Chinese dams are concentrated on the Yangtze River basin area. Even the Three Gorge Dam, the world's biggest hydropower station, is built on the very same river. Unfortunately, fortunately, what happened was both landslide did not cause its potential damage. But this may not be the same case in the coming years. Any such similar landslide on the Yangtze River in the future could have unimaginable damage to millions of Chinese. Now, due to the time limit, as Vijay Kranti has emphasized, I will quickly finish it up. Now, fourth case example is a frequent blockage of Yalungtsambo or the Brahmaputra River in Tibet due to successive landslide. Now, on 17th October 2018, a large landslide struck the Yalungtsambo in southeast Tibet, southwest Tibet, which was the spot of landslide was about 70 kilometers from Jala village, Jalaperi mountain or the Jala village, and about 175 kilometers north of Medok town, which we know. In the landslide, 40 to 60 million cubic meters of ice and soil, earth debris fell into the river, which instantly created a 79-meter high barrier dam. The landslide blocked the main course of the river and formed a barrier lake. The scale of the landslide was so huge that it spread laterally along the river for almost 2 kilometers. Within 7 hours of the landslide, the river level in the barrier lake rose 40 meters above the original water level, and the barrier lake has already stretched 50 kilometers long, and the reservoir volume reached about 150 million cubic meters. On the very next day, which was on 18th October, the water level of the barrier lake has already crossed 50 meter higher than the ground surface of the area, which led to inundation of Jala, part of Jala village. More than 20,000 people in Miling and Methok County in Tibet were put at risk, both either from inundation or possibility of lake bursting. A breach of the landslide dam could also bring massive flood along the Xiang River in Arunachal Pradesh as well. On the third day of the landslide, that is on 19th October, the barrier lake was overtopped as it crossed, as the lake water level had risen up more than 75 meters above the original level. The peak breaching flow was as large as 32,000 cubic meters per second at the very dam side. The base flow resumed its original level only on 20th October, which means it took almost one whole day for the excess flow in the river to recede. Now, this wasn't the only such landslide that blocked Yalung Tsambo. There were similar landslides in the region as well. In 2017, a similar landslide partially blocked the same river due to from a landslide due to which was caused by an earthquake. And on 9th April 2000, there was a huge landslide in Jammu, which blocked the Yugong River, which is a tributary of Yalong Tsambo River, for 62 days. And the landslide reached only on 6th June 2000, and outburst flood traveled for a distance of 500 kilometers downstream to the full floodplain of the Brahmaputra in northeastern India. So any landslide that blocks a major river and creates a barrier lake poses a serious threat to the residents in both upstream and downstream of the dam. Yalung Tsambo is no ordinary river. The 3,800 kilometer long river provides a livelihood for about 36 million people in India and about 166 million people in Bangladesh, some way or the other. So a similar landslide induced by glacier slide was reported as recently as in March 2021 near Yalung Tsambo's Great Bend, which means the super dam that was reported in recent years and approved by Chinese government would be at constant risk of hitting by a massive landslide, because there are 12 major glaciers in that particular region, which could break at any time. So to conclude, the Tibet plateau is facing temperature rise twice the global average. It has seen a continuous increase in both temperature and precipitation, which means the scale and frequency of more such glacier avalanche, mountain collapse, landslide, and river blockage will happen in the coming years. Tibet is not only the world's highest and largest plateau, but also the most glaciated region, as Professor Milab rightly stated in his presentation. And Tibet Plateau is also the head source of Asia's largest river. So any drastic ecological change in Tibet will have global implication, particularly to the South and Southeast Asian regions. The dozens of Tibetan rivers, which support 1.8 billion people in Asia, will be at constant risk of some form or the other from a natural disaster because of rising temperature, increased precipitation, and a destructive form of dam construction, mining, and other infrastructure development in the region. So what we need to do is to protect Tibet's environment, Tibet's ecological stability of the Tibet Plateau for the well-being of 1.8 billion people here in Asia, and also for global population in general. So with that, I conclude here, and I want to thank the organizers for bringing such discussion on this very day, which is World Environment Day. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tempa Galchenji, for throwing light on one specific aspect, that Tibet is not theoretically prone to accidents. Actually, there are accidents happening, and unfortunately, the Chinese system does not permit every accident to be known by the rest of the world. But as you explained, that the whole system, river system, and the glaciers, everything is fragile in Tibet. So it is advisable for China not to play with these the ecology of Tibet. Otherwise, it is going to cause serious damage to South Asian countries and Southeast Asian countries. So thank you very much for underlining this very important point. And now we come to our last speaker, Mr. Sonam Tsering. Sonam Tsering ji is, as I said, he is a senior leader of Tibetan Youth Congress, which is the largest socio-economic political organization of Tibetan diaspora and holds great influence among the Tibetan diaspora, as well as Friends of Tibet and Tibet's overall its approach, its outreach to the rest of the world. Mr. Sonam Tsering, please.
Thank you, Vijay Krantiji, for the kind introduction. First of all, I, on behalf of the Tibetan Youth Congress, extend our greetings and gratitude to all the prominent speakers for taking part in our webinar and enlightening us with your expertise. So many of my points were already covered and highlighted by the previous speakers. So I will skip some of them and will brief it up because of the time limitation. So before the Chinese occupation of Tibet, Tibet had the most successful system of the environmental protection, where formal protection of wildlands, wildlife, parks, and reserves were unnecessary, because Tibetan Buddhism taught the Tibetan people the importance of the interdependence and the equality of all living beings. Therefore, everyone lives harmoniously with the nature. Even as early as 7th century, we have environmental and animal protection edicts issued by the 33rd king, King Songtsen Gampo, and also an environmental protection law called Rilung Tangsi, or the Mountain Valley Edict, exists at the time of the 5th Dalai Lama. And these edicts serve as an important and useful ecological guidelines to protect the wildlife and the Tibetan environment. But the Chinese, which calls Tibet as the Xizang, the Western Treasure House, occupied Tibet and opened its door to destroy the Tibet's rich mineral resources and the environment. They have not only mined the minerals out of the Tibetan mountains and sacred sites and insulted the very belief systems of the Tibetans, but also they started eating anything that walks, crawls, swims, and flies with its back to heaven, as the Chinese says. Because of which wide varieties of Tibetan wild animals were on verge of extinction, and it negatively affected the ecosystem of the Tibetan plateau. And on the basis of this very incident, I have a very strange and interesting story to share with you all. That we all know that the Chinese are fond of eating meat. So when the first Chinese came in Tibet in 1950s and then occupied Tibet in 1959, many of the Chinese armies and laborers came to Tibet, and they started hunting birds, ducks, dogs, by wearing Chinese uniform and clothes. And gradually these birds started and made them immediately fly away as soon as they see the Chinese approaches. So it eventually forced the Chinese to wear Tibetan dress. Likewise, all the development efforts the Chinese government is making in Tibet have more negative implications than the positive outcomes as spoken by the previous speakers. Whether it's a damming project or many activities, which forces Tibetans to resettle in a concrete settlement and becomes the victims of hardline policies and the pollutions caused by the continuous exploitation of the Tibetan rich natural resources. Um, Therefore, through this platform, I also demand the Chinese government that the real beneficiaries of the any development in Tibet must be Tibetans, and any development project that China undertook must be environmentally sustainable, culturally sensitive, and economically beneficial to the local Tibetans. And for your kind information, I have the experience of grazing yaks and collecting caterpillars when I was back in Tibet 18 years back. So at that time, we can graze yaks and goats anywhere as we like, and we can collect caterpillars from anywhere as we choose. But with imposition of more and more movement restrictions these days, Tibetans are facing a lot of difficulties, either in overgrazing issues or the income of the family. Therefore, if the Chinese continues to mine minerals out of the mountains and continues to exploit the Tibet rich natural resources at the current rate, then I'm worrying and wondering if we would ever be able to see the beautiful Tibetan nomads grazing their yaks at the greener hills and then singing songs at the high standing Himalayas. So I think it's high time to expose the Chinese for their exploitation of Tibetan rich natural resources, which will not only benefit the Tibetans in preserving and protecting Tibetan rich natural resources, but it will also save many lives in the downstream countries of the South Asian countries. So as far as Tibetan Youth Congress is concerned, we hold general body meetings after every 3 years, and we hold working committee meetings at every year, and we adopt agendas, resolutions, and we organize a lot of environmental related campaigns. And we also organize awareness talks, symposiums, highlighting the global importance of Tibet's environment, like this one. So in near future, we may organize a lot of campaign activities of this kind due to the deteriorating environmental issue in Tibet. So I request all our experts and prominent speakers to continue to participate in our future webinars activities. That's all. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sonam Cheringji, for being so precise. And we are all aware of the activities of Tibetan Youth Congress, the way Tibetan Youth Congress has given leadership to the Tibetan society, especially the diaspora. And the way, as I have noticed in last almost 50 years, Tibetan Youth Congress has been the nursery of social and political leadership among the Tibetan diaspora. So we are very much hopeful that TYC is going to go on playing this role and lead the Tibetan freedom movement. So now we are reaching the conclusion. I wish we had more time, but still I would wish, especially I will request Gabriel, because Gabriel, you are sitting in Australia and you are already, it is already late, not evening, it is late, it is now night there, and it's the winter is on. I would request you to please stay for a little while. Can we have 10 minutes of question answer session if our panelists agree?
Yes, I hope we have some questions waiting for answers.
Okay. So may I ask, without wasting much time, Ayushi, I'm sure you have a few questions from our audience. Can you please start firing?
Yes, sure, sir. There are 4 very interesting questions that have come about. So I'll read out all of them, and then probably the panelists can respond to it. The first one is: destruction of the Tibetan plateau has global impact. We need global support and effort in order to prevent ecological disaster. Can the speakers highlight what individuals can do in this regard? The second one is that various methods from discussions to demonstrations have been tried out. The audience wants the speakers to suggest new methods to counter the monster called China. The third question that has come about is on mining and construction of big dams. It says extensive mining would end up poisoning water bodies. Construction of big dams would endanger many lives, would actually magnify this problem. When will China be held accountable for all of this? And there's one last question that has just come about. That is, China continues to build huge dams in Tibet, disregarding the interest of lower stream countries like India, Bangladesh, Pakistan, etc. So what step India has taken officially on that issue? What are its future plans if China continues building more dams? So I request the speakers to comment on this, please.
Okay, so may I request Gabriel first? Yes, please, you raise your hands. Yeah, please.
Yeah, thank you so much, Vijay. I would like to turn to the question about new methods for a moment. On mining, there's every this is an issue that hasn't been spoken so far. The Tibet, right along the valley of the Yalong and up the Kichu, the river that feeds through Lhasa into the Yalong and further as you go east into Kham, all along that 2,000 kilometer long belt, there are copper deposits. The Chinese geologists have mapped them in great detail over the last 40, 50 years, but only a few mines have actually started operating on a large scale, on a scale that, you know, is comparable to copper mines elsewhere in the world. Now that is changing rapidly, partly because of China's export of COVID and no longer suffering from COVID because it's, and as a result, its economy is now booming. The demand for copper is soaring because there are now so many new electric vehicles that need copper as well as lithium from Tibet. Because all of the power grids that export electricity from Tibet to China, lowland China, coastal China, all need copper. For all of those reasons, the price of copper has risen, and as a result, the amount of mining in Tibet has risen dramatically. And one area that is now expanding really, really fast is Yulong in Kham, near Derge, between Chamdo and Derge. And again, it's an issue that we just don't hear about. The Chinese mining company that owns it and runs it boasts on their website about what they're doing. This is not obscure or difficult information to find. And that leads me to my response to the request for new methods. It seems to me that we repeat the same injuries that have been done to the land, the landscapes, and to the people of Tibet, sometimes, you know, decades ago, as if they're all happening today, when in fact there are lots of new threats and challenges. And that suggests to me that we need to monitor what's going on. We need to monitor China's plans. We need to delve into Chinese sources. We need to read Chinese official documents far more and in far more detail, and to cross-check the sometimes deliberately vague language that they use a lot more. Claude Afi has done, quite a lot of this. Timothy Gelson has done this, but I think we need a whole lot more of that, just to get a handle on how China is trying to shift the debate and to keep up with the fact that the situation is changing, and we do need some new approaches.
Thank you. Claude or Professor Sharma, would you like to add to that?
First, I'm sorry, we have a power cut, so I'm in the dark. Just the UPS is working, but doesn't matter if you don't see me.
No, we can see you. Don't worry.
I want just, I say something not very correct. I mentioned Sun Yat-sen, but I was meaning for the railway between China and Tibet, which was opened in 2006. But I have seen in a file for 5354, the Chinese already thinking of a big dam in the Yalong Tsangpo. So the reference to Sun Yat-sen was meant only for the railway. I can't answer Michael. I don't know what can be done. For the government of India, I can say that I think the issue is being taken regularly, but in a very discreet way. You know, the Ministry of External Affairs, the East Asia Division is not saying it openly. They are not, the spokesperson never mention it. I think they're very discreetly. There is some agreement have been signed for, I mentioned it already, for sharing the data, the flow of the Yalong Tsangpo, as well as the Sutlej, first 2003 after 2006, and this is reviewed periodically. Sometimes China is not providing this. I think the government, mainly the MEA, has to be more proactive and speak openly to the Indian public what is going on, because now it's just left to the media to do it, and sometimes the media get carried away. In one way, the MEA is more posed, and when they say things, they think about it before, which is not always the case of the media. But traditionally, the MEA has been very, very cautious about this thing, and it's understatement, French understatement,
Yes.
but it should change, because it's an extremely serious issue for India, not only for the environment, but also for the strategic and military, all these villages and all. So I think it's time. The Ladakh confrontation is not over, but it's time for the government of India to be more proactive and say it straight and openly that is not okay. You can't, we are also a stakeholder. You're not alone in that. So, of course, to answer another question, that if China wants to go ahead, they will go ahead. And they don't really care, except if many, many more people come against them in different issues, like we are seeing today with the Quad, with the other issue.
Yes.
If more nations come together on economy, on the South China Sea, on the different issue, and tell China, stop it. That's all. But it will take time. For the time being, they want to reach the top of the world. I'm not speaking about Tibet. They want to go over the Americans, and nothing seems to be able to stop Xi Jinping, though he is speaking very well. We have seen in that quote I mentioned at the end, he speaks very well. He speaks about community, the share future for the humanity. He spoke in Davos. He spoke so many speeches on that. But at the same time, this thing happening in South China Sea is threatening to take over Taiwan, and is 60,000 Jawan from both sides are in Ladakh since now 1 year. So there's a dichotomy. So I think the world should point out to that dichotomy between what they say and what they do. Thank you.
Professor Sharma, Tempaji and
yes, sir.
Sonamla. Yes,
Yes,
please.
sir. I would as researchers, our duty is to give 360-degree perspective of what is happening and what is going to happen. It is the political parties, it is the political heads and the diplomats who should take it from us. And one of the reasons why JNU was, founded was this, that international relations, international issues, you can highlight and take it to the government so they could get a feedback from you and ideas from you and then work on it, which is not happening any longer.
Let us hope. So Sonamji and Tempala, do you have some comments on this?
Yes.
Yes, please.
Sure, I do. There were some very important questions, but I will answer one of it, which is what people can do about that environment. Now, as Professor Milab said, researchers provide information and scientists provide information. Now, it is clear that Tibet Plateau provides livelihood for 1.8 billion people in Southeast Asia, not just India, to the population of Pakistan, India, Thailand, Laos, Cambodia, Vietnam, Bangladesh. All of these countries need to come together,
yes,
to form a collective organization to discuss and talk to the Chinese government to protect Tibet's environment. Now, protection of Tibet's environment is not about supporting Tibet. It's about it is about their own interests. It is about their future interests. So, as many of us have clearly stated in our presentation, that protection of Tibet Plateau means a continuous flow of Tibetan rivers into these regions, a stable climatic condition in Southeast Asian countries, and also a stable livelihood for people across Himalayan range. So what they need to do is such issues should be raised at government levels. Such issues should be spoken at the parliament sessions, and more importantly, governments across Southeast Asian countries who are dependent on Tibetan rivers should talk to the Chinese government on environmental issues. This is what we feel need to be done.
Okay. Sonamji, you would like to add anything? No. Okay. So I will just add one. There was a question from Punsok Chang, who Tempaji has almost answered a good part of it. That Punsok Chang, he raised the issue of dams being created in Tibet. So what can be done about it? I would only add that recently the American government has come out with a new law, what they call Tibet Policy and Support Act of 2020. It has a provision of forming an international diplomatic alliance. This is exactly what American government, that law mentions, that American government has, the law calls upon the American government to form an international diplomatic alliance on these issues against China, on issues related to Tibet. I think this is where Indian government has to become active. Indian government should here realize that America, European Union, Australia, Japan, Vietnam, so many countries are right now suffering. And there are 11 countries, you name, Tempaji mentioned all the names of those countries, right from Pakistan to Laos and Cambodia, who are directly suffering because of the water policy and water stealing, damming, diversion, etc. by China. So I think this is high time the government of India and other governments should join hands. You cannot fight China alone. You cannot, but together you can. And that is where China is afraid of. So I think there is a need of an international alliance of right-thinking countries, democratic thinking countries, countries who believe in human rights, in freedom, and who have faith that every country should have freedom, and including Tibet. They should join hands. So we are already overflown. May I request Ayushi to please
There's
And
one last question, if addressed
Yeah.
to Gabriel, sir. So if that can be,
Let's see.
That's one last question. Sir, this is for you. Gabriel, sir, the question asked is, can you please deliberate more on the change in Chinese view of Tibet from liability to asset? That's specifically for Gabriel, sir.
Okay, I'll try to be brief. Yes, this may surprise a lot of people. And when I said that China is now trying to reimagine Tibet, not out of some newly found positivity or generosity, but I think China has grown tired of seeing Tibet solely as a drain, as a liability, as a threat, and nothing else. Chinese economists have recently rediscovered that economics, amongst other things, is about geography. When you look at some of the maps that go with the new 14th five-year plan, they produce maps which try to show China divided up geographically into different zones, and how each zone will contribute to making China greater, more successful, richer, but also enhance China's reputation as a world leader and, builder of ecological civilization and so on. So when you look at those maps and look at how Tibet is mapped, how it is depicted, how it is imagined by China's central planners, they are now talking about Tibet as the ecological zone that makes up for China's heavy pollution rate. Everybody knows that China burns more coal than the rest of the world put together, more steel, more cement, and generates more carbon pollution, far more than any other country. So China needs Tibet to legitimate the rest of the economy. So I'm not necessarily saying that China has had a sudden change of heart, although if you look at recent Chinese documentaries about Tibet, they are now starting to show nomads as a natural part of the landscape in areas where nomads are not being blamed for land degradation or for endangering wildlife. So I guess what I'm saying is that China now seems to be mixed. It seems to be contradictory. Attitudes are changing. I think all of the old negative attitudes are still there. I'm not in any way saying that China has had some sort of miraculous conversion, but at the same time, much more positive imagery and imaginings of Tibet are now much increasingly evident. So what we make of it, how we respond to it, how the rest of the world responds to it, I think is uncertain. But I think if we want to persuade people to be influential, to be part of global debates, we do need to pay attention to the ways in which China is, repositioning itself. And I don't think it's just a propaganda move. I think it really is a reimagining of Tibet. Now that environment has monetary value, we could, from a Tibetan viewpoint, say that the natural environment does not and should not have a dollar value, monetary value. But now that it does, and the world is like that, then it's something that the Chinese are taking seriously. I think that's enough.
Right. So I think this is time to conclude. I wish we had more time, but I think the success of any discussion is that we leave unhappy that we didn't have enough time. So I think that is an indicator of success. So Ayushi, let us conclude with a word of thanks.
Thank you, sir. On behalf of the Center for Himalayan and Asian Studies and Engagement, CHASE, which is a think tank dedicated to the Himalayan region, to studying the Himalayan region in its totality, and the Tibetan Youth Congress, which is the largest and oldest socio-political organization of Tibetan diaspora, with an active membership of more than 30,000 people. I would like to thank the entire panelists, which are scholars, activists, and policy impactors in their own right. I would like to thank, they've joined us from various parts of India and the globe. I would like to thank Gabriel Lafette sir, Claude Arpi sir, Professor Milap Chand Sharma, Tempa Gyaltsen La, Sonam Chering La. Thank you all for sparing your time from your extremely busy schedule to being with us and discussing this very important topic, which is environmental destruction in Tibet by China and its implications for Asia. It's really wonderful that you have enlightened us on a whole lot of aspects. Gabriel sir, from wasteland to how there is this model of ecological civilization that China is trying to build up. Claude Arpi sir, the very important Yarlung Sangpo project and how it's going to impact India, which is, this project is hardly 30 kilometers. So there is a socio-political and strategic dimension to it, and how China in its garb of green energy is actually promoting red energy. So some very important, Milap sir has brought about the entire, the importance of how Tibetan glaciers, which are considered the third pole of the world, how their destruction can impact. It's not just a problem of Tibet alone. It's a global, it has global ramifications. And Tempa La, how he's mentioned the increase in carbon and methane emissions due to the destruction of Tibetan grasslands and the melting of permafrost. Sonam Chering sir mentioning about grazing problems endangering life and livelihood of the Tibetan nomads and sharing his own experience in this regard. So it was wonderful having you here, listening to you. It's really been, and this is even more important for us here at CHASE and the Tibetan Youth Congress, because we are trying to bring forth all issues of Tibet to the world. Ignorance is no more a bliss. So understanding various aspects of Tibet becomes important. And today on the World Environment Day, understanding the environmental issues of Tibet becomes extremely critical, because China, as of today, is emitting 27% of world emissions. Carbon emissions come from that one single country. So you can understand that China is no more a problem in terms of, it's not just COVID-19 that we are struggling with in terms with regard to China, but there are a whole lot of environmental problems which have short-term and long-term implications for the world. And as I would end on the note that Mother Earth has enough to take care of everyone's need, but not of a single country or a single organization's greed. So here it becomes very important to halt China in its footsteps, because Tibet is not just the problem of one single country, but it is a global problem. And environment requires the efforts, as rightly said by Vijay Kranti sir, of everybody. I will fail in my duties if I forget to thank the two people behind the scenes, Tenzing Thai, who's put together this webinar. He's the technical in charge of it, and Anjali Mishra, who will be reporting. You will find these reports coming in the next couple of days. She's a young scholar with CHASE, and thank you both for the background support. And of course, our mentor, Vijay Kranti ji, who is a friend of Tibet and has been following Tibet-China relations for long years. Thank you, sir, for bringing this stellar panel together. We hope to receive your support and patronage in our future webinars, discussions, the policy papers that we intend to bring in the days and years to come. Thank you so much.
So thank you, friends. Thank you very much. I wish you very good health to you and everybody you love. So please keep safe and healthy. We'll meet again. Thank you very much, everybody. And to our audience also, thank you very much.